Yeah, I was not long at Google. So for 4.5 months, I left Google, and then Twilio was completely remote.
That's true. I'm curious, why do you leave Google? Was back to office policy the only
No,
motivation
wait, wait,
behind
wait,
it?
wait. We need to. We will ask that at the right time, though.
That's a great question.
Let's
Let's
wait for
build
the.
suspense.
I'm really looking forward to know more about you. I mean, I've seen your Instagram, your LinkedIn, and your YouTube channel a little bit, and your journey has been a bit different than most. So I think that's the reason we were very, interested in having a chat with you.
To begin,
Awesome. It's great to be here.
thank you. We're looking forward to the conversation. So, to begin, I guess the first question to ask you is, who is Rishabh Kumar and why should people listen to you?
Whoa, it's a banger of a question. I guess I can start with my professional side of things. So I'm a staff developer evangelist working for Twilio. If you don't know what developer evangelism is, basically I work in developer relations, and you can look it up what developer relations is. And yeah, I came to Canada as an international student. Just to give you a context, I did my high school in India, came here, did my diploma in computer networking and technical support. So couldn't really get really good job in tech apart from like IT admin or help desk. So that's where I started. I started doing tech support for a company in Kingston, Ontario. It was a SaaS company that managed printers. So very niche and cool tech that they built, even though there were only 38 people company, so very small. The vibe there was very startup vibe, but they had been in the industry for like 10 years at that point. So did tech support. It was very challenging because I didn't have the public, you know, speaking or public
Yeah.
interaction skills, because people would get mad at me, say curse words on
Really?
call, like your software is not working, and they would just hang up, and I'm like, what
That
I'm
sucks.
supposed to do?
Like, that's not a good
Yeah.
working environment.
Yeah, so I realized I didn't want
Right.
to do this for the rest of my life. Discovered cloud computing, and I had great team there, so I was able to pivot, and they promoted me to be a cloud engineer after a year in tech support.
Okay.
Did that for 2 years. Then we had an acquisition which led me to the DevOps engineering team. And then later I joined Google on the GCP team. And now I'm at Twilio doing developer relations. So a lot of different roles I've had over the past. I don't have a computer science degree. I
What
think
did you
that's
study
why my
here?
journey is
Just,
kind
just,
of.
just to for the audience to know as well.
Yeah, so I did computer networking and technical support. It's a 2 year diploma that people can take after their high
Hmm.
school. And there was, I can go in depth about like the
Yeah,
subjects
sure.
and
I mean,
what kind
I'm
of
just wondering. So
expectations.
you came right after your school, let's say, like at least what we
High
call
school.
school in India. Like here, even universities are considered school. But yeah, overall, like, so you must be like maybe 17, 18 years old.
Yeah, I was 17 when I landed in
Okay, and
Canada.
how was it like? Like we came here after doing our bachelor's in engineering, so I mean we were still like lost and we didn't know what to do. But like you were, just a kid out of school.
Yeah, I think the correct word to describe it is I was
Mm.
immature. Lost, I don't know, because I always knew I wanted to do something with
Hmm.
computers. But that felt like a
Right.
dream after like 6 months here in Canada, because I started working at a gas station, after like 2 or 3 months
Okay.
I got here, like every international
Right.
student
Right.
does. And I worked in that gas station for 2.5 years. Most of it was, doing night shifts and stuff. And I started to realize that this might be the reality. This is where I'll
Right.
be for the for the foreseeable
Hmm.
future. Because people start promising you, okay, we'll make you assistant managers, and like your PR is figured
Right.
out. And just for context, PR is for permanent residency, and so things like that. You start playing them in your head, and like, is this why you left your home
Right.
country? And I think that reminder was really crucial for me. Just reminding myself, like, this is not why I left my home country. I want to do something with
Hmm.
computers. It's still possible, even though there was, like, as I said, I was in Kingston. There was so less
Right.
exposure specifically for diploma holders to know if it was possible to get, a job in IT
Hmm.
after just a computer networking diploma. But it very well was possible. It all comes down to what you make most out of
Right,
it.
right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's. I have a bunch of questions and more things to dig in. So I'll start from the beginning. First, you said you're working in developer relations right now. Uh, we'll ask you more. Like, I want to know more. Like, what does a person in your position do in a day to day basis? How did you get into it, and how can maybe a student straight out of college or a university can get into this as well?
Good question. I think so. If I had to describe developer relations, it is key in the words
Hmm.
itself. So you basically act as the point of contact for developers who are using your product. So Twilio has a bunch of APIs and
Hmm.
SDKs. We are a developer first company. Um, we started as communications platform as a service. So if you want to integrate
Yeah.
SMS, voice calls, or WhatsApp, email into your applications, you'll think of
Yeah.
Twilio by using our different SDKs. And in order to support our developers, we need to have proper documentation, proper use case examples, blog posts, videos, webinars, and
Okay.
also sometimes going to conferences and um, showcasing how Twilio works. So all of that is basically done by developer relations teams. So you'll see me at conferences talking about our APIs. You'll see me on Twilio's YouTube channel,
Mm.
showcasing how you build like a two-factor authentication system using
Right.
Twilio. Or you'll see me as an author on some docs or some blog posts that are on Twilio's website. But yeah, and then also people can reach out, through Stack
Hmm.
Overflow or through
And you would help them
any other
solve any issues
mediums.
that they might have. Like I have used SendGrid a lot, from
Nice.
figuring out marketing campaigns to basically emails of notifications. Let's say I used to work in a CRM platform where, if there's a new customer, you would like to send an email. If there's a new activity in the account that someone is interested to know, they have subscribed to it, we would send them an email. And for everything we use SendGrid. I don't know when we started using it if SendGrid was still a part of Twilio or not, but regardless, like, uh, so you would be involved in even creating the documentation, like, because that's what I used 90% of the times while setting it up.
Yeah, so we do have a specific role within developer
Mm.
relations. They usually you'll see them as like if I had to work for
Hmm.
Google as documentation person. The title can vary, so we have them as developer educators.
Okay.
They're also known as technical writers, but in some certain companies, they're also just developer relations engineer. It all boils down to like what your responsibility is. Um, yeah, and those are like clearly mentioned during the job application process. Um, because I know we have, I believe it's a developer educator role, who will be responsible for the curriculum side of the
Mm.
webinars and videos that we create specifically for startups. And that role is currently open, if I'm not wrong. But you can look at the job description, kind of get what to
Hmm.
expect from job in developer
Right.
relations.
So I would say, I don't want to say all, but from people I've met, like 90% of the people who are looking some kind of jobs in tech are going for job titles like front end developer, back end developer, full stack developer, maybe a cloud engineer, and things like that. So those roles are, we won't talk about them much because they are well known already. This is one of the more unique roles. Like, we talked before with Colby, and James and Francesco. They're all
Francesco's.
developer advocates, right? So I just want to know, how could a new grad get into this field, and would you recommend someone work as a software engineer first and then get into these roles, or can we directly start applying if someone is interested?
So I think you brought up a good point. My personal opinion is get some experience as an engineer
Mhm.
first. I'm glad I had that experience. The reason being, I know the pain
Right.
points of developers and how to connect with them. So if you don't specifically know how, I don't know, like how an
Yeah.
SDK works at a big company like
Hmm.
Twilio and how many developers might be using it with years of experience. There have been conversations where, I don't know the answer talking to these developers just based on the knowledge I have, the experience I have. The thing is, for this role, they'll look up to you for those
Right.
answers because you are the person in charge of this, right? So I think having at least, I would say, 3 years or 4 years of experience working as a software engineer, or if, because like Microsoft Azure, AWS, GCP, they also have developer relations
Hmm.
people. So for those roles, I would say, yeah, if you have experience working as a cloud engineer prior to joining their developer relations team, I think it'll be so
Hmm.
helpful, not only for your career, but it'll also make getting these jobs
Right.
very, because the thing about public speaking is you can't really convince someone if you have been in their
Yeah.
shoes. So like I try to include stories where an API didn't work for me, or I was getting a wrong status message, right? So like going through that, I think is necessary to connect with others in the
Right.
community.
Yeah. That's
I got a
so,
question too.
sure, go ahead, Kritya.
So, because this is a new role, so curious, what does the career map look like for a developer relation person? So like for example, for more traditional roles like software engineering and project managers, we know what the next step is, right? So, how does it work for a developer relation person?
So I think it's pretty, I would say, similar to like an IC SWE role. So if you want to stay, and by IC I mean individual contributor for someone listening. So for an IC, we know that for SWE there are different levels. So you have your L2, L3, L4, or in titles you will see them as SWE, senior SWE, and then staff or principal. At Twilio, we have a basic kind of ladder too. So we have your simple developer relations, then you have your senior staff, and then principal, and that is the end of it. For if you want to stay an individual contributor, but you can also move into managing people, right? That is also the case with software engineering. So have if you want to be a team lead, or if you want to manage people, you can become a engineering manager. Similarly, we have developer relations managers, um, and you can basically pick your niche. So if you want to be a manager of the documentation team, you like writing and you think you understand how docs should be written, I think that's the way to go. There's also video production, creating educational content from as a medium, video as the medium. I think that would be your fit. But since you said, Kritika, this is very new role, a lot of the companies are still figuring out the structure around this. The bigger companies have kind of figured out what works for them, and some companies have also figured out that developer relations doesn't work for them, and they have like laid off entire teams. But I think there's always that risk that not a lot of companies have figured this out. So you might be wearing multiple hats depending on what organization you join. I think my interest came from teaching itself. So like I love talking about tech,
Yeah.
hence we're on here this podcast. Um, and I love those concepts in a way that people can understand. So having that passion in mind, I think that's why I pivoted to developer
Okay.
relations. But I think, yeah, you people will need to find their why.
Right.
But just want to say that there's a lot of the structure at certain organizations is still missing. But that is the general kind of
Yeah,
roadmap.
you're right, because I've seen some companies, and even within a company I've seen that some products are more popularized by developer advocates and relations. But on the other hand, I've also seen a lot of companies, uh, I don't know if they're forcing or if developers themselves said that they want to be the ones who will the word. For example, Google is a good example for that, because GCP, I see that there are a lot of developer advocates on Instagram, on LinkedIn, YouTube, who are spreading the word. But their other product, which is Angular, I see the Angular core team themselves, like the people who actually worked on maybe a small feature which only someone who is very niche in Angular, let's say standalone components, or let's say how the tree shaking works. They will call in the person who worked on tree shaking feature, and that person might not even be very camera friendly, or might not enjoy doing that. But I see that they do get into the details and the weeds of how they implemented it, which for the right audience could be great, and for others could be boring. And I see that there's always a balance. So do you work closely with the developers who are working on the features, or are you like both these teams are very like disconnected in Twilio?
That's a good point. So at Twilio, we do have specialities. So since we have a range of products and a range of SDKs, we support Python, C Sharp, Node.js, and
Right.
some other popular programming languages. I don't know all of them, right? So my specifically with product, and this goes back to 2022 when I was hired. I was hired as, I want to put in quotes, as the Canadian evangelist, because like I was still supporting North America, but my main focus was connecting with the developer community here in Canada and how Twilio can play a part in it. I couldn't choose a specialization. So like let's say I want to support just
Right.
SMS, or programmable messaging. I could not do that because I needed to also be able to talk to developers who might be using SendGrid or Voice or WhatsApp. So remained a generalist for a year and a half. For the first year and a half, knowing surface level stuff for most of the products for
Yeah.
Twilio, but specifically a lot of my talks and contributions were in programmable SMS. So I kind of like had a good understanding of what are some issues that developers might, especially with the regulations and stuff. That's where it gets tricky. So with spam and fraud on the
Yeah.
rise, there's a lot of regulations being either newly new regulations are being passed, so we have to be compliant of those as Twilio. So a lot of the issues are usually around those. Being like familiarizing myself with that was easy with
Yeah.
SMS, but it was kind of hard with voice and other channels we have. But on our team we do have developer relations people who are just SMS specialists in like Python. They work really closely with product managers and engineers who are developing new features into SMS. They also work on contributing to new docs. Let's say we have a new
Right.
feature, when should the docs be shipped, so that we are ready for that feature rollout. Also, if there should be any video guides, along with blog posts with use cases of that feature. So like they are part of the, you could say, the planning. So they're on the PM meetings, they're on the
Right.
engineering meetings, and are really tied to the roadmap of a product. Similarly, we have a person who is dedicated to voice. SendGrid, we have a developer relations engineer specifically for SendGrid. But I, on the other hand, I'm more of a generalist for now. And recently, I've been focusing a lot on AI implementations. So how conversation or our conversation or communications platform can integrate with your AI, implementations. So like integrating, or creating a chatbot over
Right.
WhatsApp that uses OpenAI's API with your own knowledge base. So those kind of implementations I've been really interested in, but now I get to work on it using
Right.
Twilio.
Yeah, that's really cool. Like, and I guess this role might also be very important because you are communicating with the end users. I'm not saying on a daily basis, but you do communicate with them. You do see their questions. So maybe you could go back to the product managers, or I don't know how it works. I'm just guessing, and you can
Yes,
let me know if I'm wrong. You can go back and tell them that, hey, you might be working on feature ABC, but the feature XYZ is one that people really want. So let's maybe spend some time there.
definitely, definitely. Yeah, feedback is very crucial, I think, in any product's success, specifically when it's um, big enough that developers around the world are using
Yeah.
it. You want to make sure your your product success will be measured if the developers are happy using it. So yes, we do have like feedback syncs where we do exactly
Right.
the same. It's either through one-on-one feedback that developers might have given us through you know DMs on social media, or we see like a really popular Stack Overflow question, or even I have met developers like you said you use SendGrid. So if you have any
Right.
feedback for me that I can pass on to the team, whether it's through calls or even at conferences, I've received some really constructive feedback that the teams can
Yeah,
work on
that's
and polish the
that's
product.
pretty cool. So I would like to talk a little bit about how you got into cloud, but unless Kritika has more questions about the developer advocate role, I can.
Now we're talking a lot about what you currently do, but I wanted to actually take a step back and start at the beginning. So you said you landed in Canada when you were 17 years old. You did your diploma, which was 2 years. You landed your first internship as part of your diploma, a co-op or wherever, and they turned you as a full-time employee, right? So that's how you started in tech. But now I want to know, like, why did you? So you said your first job was a help desk, IT help desk, or tech support, right? So I want to know more about your transition into cloud from there. What piqued your interest in cloud, and why did you choose cloud? Because there's so many different technologies, right? So many different streams in tech that you could have gone for.
And also, just for context, tell what year are we talking about here?
Yeah, like a timeline.
For sure, yeah. I think timeline is very important given the current time we are in, specifically in tech and how the economy has played such a
Right.
huge role. It's a great addition. Great question, Kritika. I think I'm trying to remember all the details so that my answer is true to what had happened. So yes, the co-op or the internship was part of the diploma. In order to graduate from the diploma, you needed to do 2 month co-op at a very similar role to what the diploma was. So it could be help desk. So I did a junior IT admin kind of co-op at a company called Printfleet, which is also in Kingston, and the role was very basic IT admin stuff. I would get Jira tickets about, okay, X employee's laptop is not working or is due for an update. I would go to that employee, do the whatever the ticket was assigned to me. There was only one IT person at this company. So as I said in the beginning, 38 people company, it was very small. So I had a lot of exposure and things to learn from this person because he was kind of like wearing so many hats. We had an on-premise data center too. So one of the tickets that I got assigned was, all of those to the latest version of long-term supported Ubuntu.
Yeah. No,
So
this is what I like
it
about
was
startups.
unpaid.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to add something here. This is what I really like about startups. Most people start looking at companies like Google or big banks or things like that, which are great, like amazing companies, obviously. But Kritika and I, both of us, started in startups. My first job here, they were like 3 employees. The second job, they were. How many in Sanofi? We had about 45, 50 when we joined. I guess Kritika and I
I
both
guess
worked
30
together.
when we joined, and during our duration in the company, it was doubled. So at the end, by the
Yeah.
time we left, we were like around 70, 80-ish employees.
Right. So yeah, and the things we learned there, like you said, the guy you learned things from, he was wearing so many hats. Like this is exactly what we saw. Like even when you scan the ID card to get inside the building, even that part was created by the developers in the office,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
everything from scratch, and you do learn like 50 new things. And when you get into a bigger company, you get more siloed. So yeah, just wanted to add that there. And yeah, please continue.
No, definitely. I think the career trajectory, and I always kind of mention this if someone asks me about my career, the career trajectory that I've been on, and I was able to like go through step by step is was only possible because of the environment that I was in, like the small company environment where I was able to, leverage all of this information and knowledge that was being shared. Because I think it doesn't happen at big companies. And I have lived through that. So trust me when I say that. But yeah, I think it was unpaid, but I really enjoyed it. Uh, I had just so much to learn. I had Also built a really cool project that I like at that time. It was cool because I built a monitoring dashboard using Raspberry Pis for three of the big screen TVs they had across the office, which would give status on if a product was up or down for individual customers that were hosted in cloud. So that's the first time I discovered, like, okay, all of our customers for the SaaS are hosted in a cloud environment. I just didn't know what cloud it was. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, they didn't had a position under the IT team. Like when my co-op was ending, they're like, we don't have the budget. As you know, there's only one person in IT. He's the entire IT department. And I asked him like what should be my like next plan now, because I don't want to go, like, I was also still working at the gas station. Um, but I'm like, I love doing this now. I don't want to go back. He told me that there might be a technical support position, which is a different team because it was customer facing, not internal. He just said like you should definitely consider that. It is a great starting point for someone who just
Hmm.
graduated from computer networking, and you'll have a lot to learn. But also, it paid really well compared to what I was earning at gas station. Mind you, the minimum wage. This was back in 2018, early 2018, end of 2017. The minimum wage was $11. So yeah, and I'm like, okay. And then the good thing about the small company, coming to that, is he relayed all of this directly to the CTO and CFO, because you have that
Right.
and they're like, yeah, we saw Rishabh for 2 months. He's professional. He did all of these projects. It'll be great to have him because this role was coming up. Um, and so they were like, we still need to do an interview, just because of the formality, but we have a tech support role. So I went through the interview. The good thing was I knew
Right.
everyone who was on that panel. They decided to do a panel. I don't know why. So it was more like a group discussion, because I knew
Hmm.
everyone. Like I was not tensed out or anxious that what question might be asked. And it was to me, when I remember that, it was a fun interview. We had some jokes and laughs. And then comes the period of them not getting back to me
Ah,
because it
okay.
took them like 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks later, they're like, "Oh, you're hired," and I still didn't graduated from my course
Okay.
yet. Like I was still waiting on final grades. I still needed transcripts. So I'm like, "Hey, I'm still on study permit.
Right.
Like, how is this gonna work?" Um, so we figured out a way, like a joining date that was tentative, but I'm like, I'll keep you posted as soon as I get my
Yeah.
transcript. And I'm one of those persons who got his work permit at the border
Okay.
because of the same reason. So I had the job offer, I had my
Yeah.
transcript, and just went to the border. And I'm like, please give me a work permit. I know they don't do it now. Even I had a hard time to
Hmm.
convince the border officer, but it's like, since you have a job offer, I'll just for that reason I'll
Yeah.
process this, but don't tell anyone to come to the land border.
Right.
It's done online for a reason. I'm like, okay. So I'm glad that worked out. I did tech support, and during probation, so the probation was 90
Hmm.
days, and those 90 days like was I learned the most in them, because you learn things about documentation, like why every ticket should be documented, because I would get repetitive
Right.
tickets. I would get same error messages, like customer would say, hey, this is not working, this is what I'm seeing, and I would search that exact error message and find my colleague's ticket and the steps that he did. I think that was really crucial. So documentation was the first skill that I learned. Second was how you talk to people with patience. So it doesn't matter the other person was saying, like if they're pissed, if they're happy, if they're cursing, you have to keep your cool, and at the end of the day, you are there to help them. One of the colleagues taught me that they're never mad at you, they're always mad at the product. So like never take it personally, which I think is like it was the greatest
Yeah.
lesson that I could
It's
have
difficult to do
taken for
though,
the
but
entire
yeah,
year.
like it is important, but I think it's difficult.
Yeah, like early on, like I would take it personally. I'm like, why are you
Yeah.
yelling at me? Like I'm trying, like I'm here to
Right.
help you. Like if you just stay calm, we can work through this. um but over the time, like I learned, yeah, they're always mad at the product because that's why they call you. And yeah, I think the public speaking, or the how you handle levels of technical knowledge, because mind you, like sometimes I would get a call from a small or medium sized business, where the CTO was directly calling me, and now you have to be like, we might lose a business today if we don't solve this. um, so I think that taught me a lot, how to be under pressure, like how to stay calm under pressure. And and that's why I say, for people who are starting out, if you can do tech support at least for like 6 months or a year as your first role, please do it. There's no other role that will teach you this. And that's why I also have huge respect for people who have worked in the service industry. So like, if you have worked in retail, if you have worked in restaurants, um, the amount of, I don't I don't want to curse on this podcast, but the amount
It's
of
all right.
things that you have to
Yeah.
deal with, like I have huge respect. And yeah, I think 6 months in, I was handling tier two tickets. So for people who know tech support, there is usually tiers. So you might have also, when you're talking to Apple tech support or any other tech support, you might have called your bank and say, "Hey, I want to talk to your supervisor." That means it is being escalated to another tier. Um, so I was in tier two when 6 months hit, and then 9 months in, I was handling tier three tickets, which is where I discovered cloud, because a lot of it was running SQL stuff in our production database, which was on AWS. So I'm like, oh, what is
Yeah.
AWS?
So very
And
natural
that's when people
transition
like,
into, going from tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and then hearing about something like cloud exists, and that's pretty cool.
and then I started asking our cloud team, I'm like, oh, like my connection string won't work, or my SQL statement is not working. Am I missing a field? And then on a random day, I'm like, what is cloud, by the way? So they're like, do you know about servers? And I'm like, yeah, that was my diploma. Like, I know Linux, I know networking, and I know on-prem servers. They're like, yeah, we are just basically renting out these servers from AWS. I'm like, what is AWS? And they're like, oh, this is an Amazon company that rents out servers.
That's cool. I was
Um,
I was just about to
and
ask you, just explain what cloud is for someone who doesn't know, and you just did that. That if you have servers, rather than having them on your own, you rent out from it. Basically, it's you are literally a tenant when it comes to having servers. Yeah, that's
exactly, that's how they explained it to me. They're like, oh, do you own a house or do you rent? And I'm like, I have an apartment that I rent. I'm like, yeah, and we are renting out this compute power from
yep.
AWS. But we also have a house which you worked on, which is the on-prem, servers that you updated. I'm like, oh, cool. This is very fascinating. Like I could rent out, you know, compute power without having to wait like months for hardware to arrive. That's when they showed me the console, different services. So like EC2 is the virtual machines you can host on AWS, database services. And I'm like, okay. And I also discussed this with my manager, and I'm like, hey, I don't want to stay in tech support. I think since I'm at tier three, I do want to like see what career paths I can take. And I think this was the greatest advice and implementation that I've seen. And this could only happen at a small company. They're like, okay, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I don't know. Like I'm lost. So like, why don't you shadow software engineers, QA engineers, and cloud engineers, because that's the three branches we have under engineering. I'm like, okay, I can do that. So I sat down with software engineers for a week, and I'm like, I can't do this. As much I love staring at a black screen for the entire day with code on it. Um, yeah, it just wasn't something that I wanted to do back then. I sat down with QA engineers. It was cool, but yeah, the amount of knowledge you need to have to be a QA engineer at a small company, it was just crazy. Like they need to. So our SaaS was all built in Microsoft.NET, so they knew everything about
Hmm.
.NET. They knew everything about AWS, what could go wrong with AWS, and they also knew everything about on-prem, like how to host our SaaS-based solution on-prem. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I can't do
That's a good
Yeah.
insight.
QA.
Only I would say naive or new engineers or someone getting in tech thinks that QA is an easy role or a less respected role. Like I've seen a lot of people, especially in India, who think like that. And even after working, me working in small companies or bigger companies, QA roles are not easy. Like as a
No.
developer, you might be focusing on one thing, one product, but a QA team is usually more horizontal. You are working with like five other teams, and you have knowledge of five different products, not just one. I've experienced that myself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Especially like the amount of, so all of these were really experienced, like 20 years in the industry, 25 years in the industry. Um, and I looked at their documentation of when they tested like a new version of our
Yeah.
application. The amount of like context switching you need to be like, okay, this works, but I need to test this
Hmm.
thing now. Because for me, I don't have any experience. I would be like, oh, this works,
Yeah.
fine, let's
Exactly.
let's pass this, right? And then you also have to write tests. You need to have good test coverage. They wrote tests for our cloud environment. I'm like, I maybe down the
Yeah.
road, but now, like at that time, I couldn't do it.
So you
So
sat
this was
with
still
software
2018.
engineers. You didn't like that as much. You sat with QA folks. You didn't like that as much. And I'm guessing when you shadowed cloud, something like sparked up. So yeah, let's.
Yeah, yeah, something definitely sparked up. I think it comes back to my diploma and working with like Linux servers and stuff. Most of the cloud, I think 90%, I would say 90 to 95% of the cloud is just Linux
Right.
servers running on the data center. And yeah, and like this really makes sense. Instead of just handling on-prem compute, you're handling it in the cloud, and that's basically it. Of course, the verbiage is different. AWS has fancy names, Azure has their own fancy names, and GCP calls it something else. But uh, underneath, if you understand the tech, it's all the same. Um, so the I think the curve of the learning curve wasn't that steep
Hmm.
for me to get into cloud, given the knowledge I had at the time. And the turning point was they decided, I'm still in tech support, but they decided to take me to a cloud conference in Toronto. That's when it hit me because I saw 4,000 people all talking about cloud, like so passionately. And I'm like, oh, this is like cloud can be a career on its own. To Pranav, your point, the timeline is still 2018.
Right.
It was like hot,
Yeah.
really hot at that time. Certifications in cloud, like whole really good amount of value. Like you could get recruiters DMing you if you had like the solutions architect in AWS. um so yeah, that was the advice they also gave me. They're like, go through the AWS courses, do at least a cloud practitioner, and then start building some projects to understand how these services integrate together. And that's what
Yeah.
I did.
So
Just
mentorship played
a.
a big role in your transition. That's my takeaway. So that's a really good point. And also, I'm assuming you started with AWS, right? Because that was the early exposure that you got, and then you got a lot of certifications in AWS. But you said you were still in tech support at the time. So how did you? So let's say you got all your AWS certifications. What was the next step? How did you land a job in cloud?
Yeah, so I think that's where luck plays a huge role. But I also feel, I love this quote. I don't know who said this, but luck is when opportunity meets preparation,
Yep.
right? So yeah, at 9 month into tech support, I discovered cloud. So from 9 months to 12 months, which is a year in tech support, those 3 months I just learned about AWS, and cloud practitioner was the only certificate I did, which is a foundational
Okay.
level. I see people passing it now within like weeks or days. Gonna be honest, it took me
Hmm.
3 months because I had zero clue what AWS is. And I built one project that was a very basic front end website for my personal portfolio. but I hosted it in three different architectures on AWS. So I knew the benefits of hosting it in the first architecture pattern, in the second and the third, and they all had pros and cons over each other. Um, but what I also did is I understood all of the data flow and how our application works within AWS when a user signs in to our
Yep.
front end and what all happens at the back end. We used load balancers, we used CloudFront for cache, we used EC2 instances, we had RDS databases. Um, so, like, literally everything that our company was doing, I knew how they did it in AWS. And then finally, a role opened up on the cloud team, and I asked my, as you said, Kritika, my mentors, that, hey, do you think I'm ready to, take on this? And they're like, yeah, we'll even endorse you and tell the manager that you're ready. And I'm like, okay. But there were three other candidates that were external. Also, at this point, I kind of understood like how to market
Mm.
yourself. Like, always talk about your strengths. So the first thing that they could really be useful for this company is they don't have to pay me that amount of money that they would have paid some of these external candidates. I knew few insights about the external candidates. One of them had 8 years in 8 years
Mm.
experience in cloud engineering. The other one had 5 years. I'm like, I'm brand
Yeah.
new. If you give me a good hike from tech support, I'm going to be happy. The second thing I talked about is the product itself. I'm like, I know A to Z of how our product works within AWS. I'm glad I did that because we ended up talking about it for 30 minutes on a whiteboard. And like I explained every bit of it. And yeah, they were like, we'll get back to you. And after 2 days, they're like, yeah, no, you're hired.
Yeah,
And
that's really cool.
it all worked
Yeah,
out.
that's
So it
really
all
cool. You
worked
went from
out
one
because you
role to the
worked
other.
hard.
Yeah, that's exactly correct. And also, like, you were
Thank you.
there for the opportunity. I mean, you were not the only one in tech support, I'm assuming, right? So others could also have applied for the job, but maybe you were more trying to get something better than what you were doing already. And you also mentioned that you learned AWS back in 2018, which I think it was really, like, as you said, it was really hot learning cloud tech that time. It's still hot today. I mean, it is
Yeah.
still a skill that people do write on their resume and LinkedIn all the time. But yeah, back in the day, every time I opened LinkedIn, there was someone new who got a certification, right? And today is just something that is expected. Back then, it was
Yeah.
more of
Yeah. Yeah.
wow, you're doing something extra kind of a feeling. I
Hmm.
was just reading Invent and Wander book by, it's like based on Jeff Bezos, what he said in Amazon or public events, or maybe the annual earnings reports. AWS actually started. Maybe you already know about this, but they Amazon was just selling products online, right?
Yeah.
AWS was just one of the side projects that they started to see if it will work out, like hundreds of other projects they started. And they were themselves so surprised that because you
Yeah.
can't do market research on that. There's no other
No.
cloud company who's doing that. Cloud didn't exist. I mean, nothing existed. So they created something from scratch. And when they marketed it, they published the products, companies were running after it. And then it was so funny that one Jeff Bezos in one of the meetings said, AWS is even being used as a skill in people's resume now. And this was like back in the day when they started, and they themselves were so surprised. And today, like, we
Hmm.
can't imagine like a world without cloud. So you were at the right place at the right time, but also you did work hard to get what you got. So yeah, I mean, that's really cool. I want to know, like, starting in startups, you might not get the best salaries. I've seen that, but you can see, or you can get more opportunities and talk to more important people in the company. Like Kritika and I, we both used to talk with the director of engineering, which was the CEO's son.
Hmm.
And CEO used to be there all the time. And you get to learn from those people. But how important would you say, like, when someone graduates in, let's say, in Canada or America, how important is trying to get a higher paying job versus trying to maybe get into a startup and focus on learning more in the beginning? And what kind of numbers can someone expect today, right? Because yeah, you
Oh
don't need to tell anything about your salary, but just in general, if
no,
someone is watching this, uh, if they can expect maybe $30,000, then maybe staying in their own country might be better. Depends on person to person.
no, that's a very good point, I think, and I appreciate this question because I've been really transparent about salary and salary progression because finances itself is something that I had to learn. Like nobody, I was a 17-year-old kid. For me, $11 was
Right.
enough back then, right? Because you have an apartment. I had a car that I was making payments on. So like everything, like the bare
Yeah.
necessities, everything
Life
was
is good.
there.
Like you don't expect an
So
18-year-old kid in India to have a car, an apartment of their own. So yeah.
But I guess that's the sorry
exactly.
to interrupt, but that's the beauty of a first world nation. You can make a
Yes.
basic
Yes.
living, a bare minimum living here on a minimum wage, but that's not true for all the different countries, right?
That's a very good point. I also honestly feel like it's not, I don't know, this will be a controversial take. I think Canada is not what it's supposed to be. The way we are headed.
Mm.
Even I can't imagine how 2016 me would survive in today's economy with minimum wage. I can't.
Yeah.
That's the truth of it. But not to digress, I don't want people to comment controversial takes on this podcast. But talking about tech salaries, I know if you can get, and this is where your skills will have to play out. If you have the right amount of knowledge and you know how to market yourself, if you can get to work for a US based company from Canada, that's the most amount of money you'll make. Trust me, I've tried it.
I agree.
If you work for a Canadian company, I think specifically if you have undergrad, the competition right now is fierce. But let's say you get an offer, and you have the right negotiation skills and stuff. If it's a big company, and by big I mean if it's more than 1,000 employees or even 700, 500 employees, you could expect to make $90,000 a year, to depending on your negotiation skills again and how much you have done in the college or internships. If you have big names on your internships, you could also make 120,000. That's the number that I'm seeing
Right.
right now. If you don't have an undergrad degree, I think it's the times have changed a lot. Um, if you just have a diploma, it's gonna be really hard to showcase that you have the fundamental knowledge that is necessary. Um, because keep in mind, all these colleges. So let's talk about computer
Right.
networking diploma, and let's say there are 5,000 students at a certain time who graduate from this diploma. Just rough ballpark. There is nothing different between those 5,000 resumes because all of you have graduated the same diploma. I have never been asked about my grade in school or in college. So you can't really say, oh, I got a 4 GPA. Great. Like that means you were serious and you paid attention in
Right.
class. But how do you stick out of the other 5,000 students? And that's where certifications and projects played a huge role. What did you build during your co-ops played a huge role. But then as more of this advice is being shared, more people are doing it. So now all 5,000 of them are building projects that are going to look the
Yeah.
same. More 5,000 peoples have really good LinkedIn profiles that are going to look the same. So I tell this is not a great advice, but I tell people, if you have a hack of standing out, don't
All
share it
right.
until you have made your career.
But I want you to share it
And then,
now, if you can. What can someone do to stand out today?
good question. Find a problem in your
Right.
life. Find a problem in your life that you can solve with tech. So have real world applications. Don't just build another clone that I can find on Git. Build something that fixes something in your
Hmm.
life. That shows passion. That hey, um, like I had this very dumb project that I built for my girlfriend, now wife, but hey, it gets me talking during interviews, right? And people might have a laugh about it, or people might find it interesting, but it gets me and the interviewer
Right.
talking, and that's what matters. And they're definitely I had have some learnings during building that and how the underlying tech works. What are some different solutions I could have tried? And that's what we are looking for. The interviewers are always looking behind the thought process of how you are reaching to a conclusion or a solution. And if you find a way to do it through a personal project that has real world applications,
Yeah,
why not?
that's a good answer, and this is what I also recommend people. Like, don't build another library management system. Like, no one is going to care about that. Like, I always say two things. One is create something that is actually uh, connected with multiple, you know, tech stacks. For example, if you're building, let's say, a website with Angular or React, don't just stop at the front end. Maybe have it deployed on a cloud, maybe have it connected with, let's say, SendGrid or other things in which an email would be sent for authentication or alerts. It could be something simple. It could just be reminding you to drink water every 3 hours. That's fine, because what you will have to do for that is you'll have to set up authentication. You'll have to set up a database where you would store when does the person want to be reminded, how many times. So that means you are
Hmm.
inserting something into database, updating things. And if you're sending push notification on mobile, that's another concept altogether. How do you send push notification
Yeah,
from a cloud to an Android or iOS device? Or if you're sending an email, then that's integrating with services like SendGrid and many others, or SMS. So I think any of like even small projects would help you stand out. And like, you created a, so you know, an application for your girlfriend at that time. So yeah, that's pretty cool.
definitely. I think also to add to that, you covered a good point about thinking about authentication. Excuse me. Thinking about authentication, thinking about how you can deploy it to cloud. Um, so the idea is build complete projects. Like, don't just have like a website that is hosted somewhere and say like, okay, this
Right.
is this is my project. The reason being, at these companies that you're going to work at, they don't have incomplete projects. All of their products need to be complete that can be used by their customers. If you're building something, about security, think about authentication, think about hosting, how the hosting can be optimized. And that is where the challenge lies. I know it's tough. You are not expected to know everything, but I think knowledge gaps are great teachers. That's where you'll dig into, like, I was building an API the other day and I always kind of use REST, but I'm like, okay, let me see, what GraphQL has really in
Yeah.
store, because I've never explored it. And the amount of things you'll learn on like a new API technology is like, it blew my mind, right? And now I can talk about it during interviews. So yeah, build complete projects.
In addition to building projects, there's another point I'd like to add. So, a lot of people work on hobby projects, which is great, but they keep it to themselves. The most they'll do is put it on GitHub, right? But another thing that I feel is very important is to put yourself out there, to talk about what you've built, right? So there's a lot of local meetups and like
Mm,
local conferences. I mean, I'm sure you're aware because you give a lot of talks. So they happen. I mean, they've started happening everywhere in tech now. It's very popular, and you can opt in to be a speaker at the conference, where you can just do, like, what you can do is like talk about your project and your journey and all of that, right? So you put yourself out there and you aggrandize, you build up your social network. Because I mean, it's one thing to build projects, but like, if you really are looking for a job, you need to get to that point where you get an interview where you can actually talk about your project. So there's a lot of like different steps before that, before going on to that stage. So I feel networking, it might sound trite, like very redundant. A lot of people have talked about it a lot of times, but I cannot stress enough on the importance of networking and how people overlook it.
Yeah, it's a
So,
great point. I got my first job because I used to go to meetups.
right.
I started
nice.
meeting a guy who was he was trying to hire someone for his startup, and he wasn't really interested into me because I was a fresher, straight out of, I was still studying and I didn't have any experience. But he started seeing me in 3, 4, 5 different meetups, and he was like, You are everywhere. Let's have an interview. And that's how I got my
Yeah.
first job
Nice.
as well.
And that actually brings me back to like the point you raised, Rishabh. Today, to stand out, you need to show your passion, right? So if you're going to these meetups and you're frequently showing up, you're meeting the same people in different meetups, that actually shows passion, right? Because you're doing something out of your
Definitely.
ordinary schedule.
No, definitely. And I think you are gonna be your best advocate. And any chance you get at doing that face to face has way more value than sending in a resume on a web portal where thousands of others are sending their resumes. So any chance you get to be different from that and getting you that, you know, first conversation, because all it needs for the other person is context. If they get it from the resume and they feel like you will be good fit, of course it's going to work for you. But as I said, there are thousand other resumes that they're going through, and not a lot can be different when you're applying for the same job. So if you can go to a meetup and showcase that, now they have not only a face to the name, but they also know that, hey, you know, we met in person. And I feel like human connection plays a really important role in you know, securing jobs or finding like a long-term career. The reason being, we are social like animals. So
Yeah.
that is the only thing I also miss of working in office, is the human interaction. You know, you get to go to grab a cup of coffee from the kitchen and you find someone else too, and you're talking about your day and or the issue you faced yesterday. And that's the only thing I miss about being in an office. But I think you mentioned a great point. And yeah, go to meetups, um, be active in like local communities, showcase that, you know, why you should be
Right.
in tech,
And that is
basically.
one big benefits of big cities. In smaller cities, that might be more difficult to find, or
True.
you might only have one meetup. Like in Montreal,
True.
I can say when I was a student, even though I did not have a full time job, there were so many meetups that if I'm going to one, that means I'm not going to two other. You know, they
Yeah,
were
yeah, yeah.
happening all the time. And as a student, I was getting free beer, or something to drink with pizza every time I go. So why not?
Yeah,
You know,
there's
it's
additional perks of going to a
right.
meetup too, the free food, the free
Yeah.
drinks. But also,
Yeah.
you need those oxytocins flowing, like you don't get that kind of interaction over a Zoom meeting, right? I mean, it's different. And it's scientifically true. Like your body releases hormones, oxytocins, when you actually meet someone in person, right? You build this different, there's a spark. You build a different relationship with them.
Definitely.
They remember
Yeah.
you for a longer time.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and I also feel like one of the reasons that I've heard as an excuse from a lot of people, you know, going out in public, whether it's meetups or conferences, is like they're introverted and they cannot talk to other people in a public setting. No one believes me, but I'm an introvert and I'm giving out talks at different conferences. I'm on
Yeah.
podcasts. I'm on YouTube. Being an introvert doesn't have to do anything with you marketing yourself, because at the end I think it's your career. So like start practicing, you know, having conversations, whether it's your friends or not,
Yeah.
but like start having, build those
Hmm.
skills. Because I think having, what is more important to you,
Yeah.
having a job in tech, if it is that important to you, like you'll build the skills that are necessary to get there. But yeah, I just wanted to add
Right.
that.
And getting started is the most difficult part. Like after that, it just works out.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep, the
definitely.
first opportunity is the hardest to back. Okay, so I think this is a great segue into what I want to ask next, because we're talking about getting a job in Canada. So nowadays we see a lot of hate towards Canada being spread, right? How Canada does not have any jobs anymore, how people should go back to their home countries and not even like come to Canada to pursue further career opportunities in the first place. So what are your thoughts about that
And even you mentioned that you don't know how the Rishabh back then would have survived in today's
today?
economy.
Yeah.
So, which you said might be controversial, but yeah, let's get into it because I think it might be important for someone who's still trying to decide if they should come here or not.
Yeah, so I think my the limited amount of understanding that I have regarding a country's economy and how it can thrive, I think minimum wage jobs. First of all, if you're coming from another country, doesn't matter what country. If you're coming from another country to have your dream life in Canada, you need to focus on high skilled jobs. You cannot focus on minimum wage jobs that Canada now has the workforce to fill them. The immigration in any country has been because, like, it started at a point because they were missing high skilled workers. And by high skilled workers, I mean it could be any sector, right? In Canada, we saw that with IT, healthcare, and even at some point with um, blue collar jobs, right? So now I think we have reached we are at a good standing when it comes to workforce. So we have good amount of candidates that can fill these IT jobs. I don't know about healthcare; it's not my industry, but someone probably can answer on that better. But yeah, your focus shouldn't be like, okay, I'm gonna come to this country. Yes, survival and living are two different things. Survival is possible to some extent with not skilled jobs, and by not skilled I mean where you don't have to constantly learn new
Right.
things, where you don't need a specialized degree or diploma to perform it. um, Anyone can be trained on it. I also feel like will not get you anywhere. It is so easily replaceable. Like, I don't know why people don't deeply think about this, but we all know about AI
Right.
and its implications and implementations. We saw that with smart kiosks that we see at Walmart or McDonald's and
Yep.
things. So these low skill jobs are easily replaceable. Why would you pursue them if you already know the fact that they can be replaced by modern technology? So I highly suggest you start looking at a skill that you like. It doesn't have to be tech. If you like something else and you're really good at doing it, you will definitely get good amount of money if you're good at doing it. It can be anything. It can, like, it even can be video editing, right? It can be music production. But if you're good at it and you have that skill, you'll do fine, because if something that is valuable to someone else, they will pay the money. Trust me, like, there is no denying that. I've seen company hire, even my, like, the companies that I worked, hire contractors for like week long projects that I knew should have taken like, you know 3-4
Right.
hours for like thousands of dollars, because it's a skill that is not found easily within the market. So, like, look for those opportunities, and I think that applies to like anything in life. um, so it's not specifically for tech workers.
Would you say that finding a job in Canada today is more difficult than it was before?
Are we talking
Tech,
about
only
tech?
tech.
Yes.
Yeah, I think to some extent. The reason is we needed a great reset, and we are there
Hmm.
now. Tech was this huge sector that was flourishing at a rate that didn't make sense to how the economies work and how money works in our world. It was great period. A lot of people made fortune. That is great. You know, if you were there at the right time, you probably would have earned, like, I've seen salaries of $500,000 per year for some engineers if you were really skilled and if you were right at the right place at the right time. Some people at Google made really good amounts of money even in Canada. But then we saw how overly paid, or those skills or that amount of workforce was not needed for the tasks that were at hand. We saw that with COVID because everyone was staying at home. A lot of normal people started using tech, because they were at home. you know Netflix saw huge traffic during those times because a lot of people were watching Netflix. A lot of people were watching YouTube. So the streaming services saw a lot of traffic. Amazon saw amazing numbers when it comes to their e-commerce
Yep.
business. So obviously they needed more engineers to help serve these customers, these digital products and services. And we also saw that boom with cloud. That's how I got hired basically at GCP, is because a lot of these companies now relied on cloud computing because hardware was very hard to get. We saw the silicon like shortage and stuff. So a lot of companies and small businesses also started moving to cloud. Hence the rise in cloud computing jobs, and that's how a recruiter reached out to me, right? And then we hit the reset because now everyone has to come back to normal life. Um, Things started opening up. Not the mass hiring we saw within big tech. Now those workers were not needed. Companies couldn't afford the amount of salaries they were giving out. Hence, we saw a huge amount of
Right.
layoffs. What that did is now you have these highly skilled workers who have worked at Google, Meta's, Amazons and Microsofts. They are in the market, along with you being in the market, along
Fresh
with
graduates.
new graduates. Yeah. And it's basic economic, like the
Right.
supply is not there, like the demand is not there, but the supply is huge. Whereas before COVID it was the other way around. We had a huge demand of tech workers, but the supply was always
Yeah.
short.
So before
And
a new grad, like you said, was competing with 5,000 other new grads, but now they are competing with 5,000 plus maybe 200,000 people who got fired last year in North America. This is not just a number for Canada,
yes.
but I know the number was north of 200,000, engineers or developers or similar jobs who got fired. So it's the competition is more than it ever was.
Yeah, definitely. And we also saw, like, I saw this great reset in salaries too. Like if you're in the market and you're looking for a new job and you have been in the tech industry, there's very less likely chance you'll get the same amount of money that you were seeing 2 years ago. I have given some interviews in the past, and while I was at Twilio, but wanted to clear that up that I'm not looking for new jobs. If my coworkers are watching, I'm really happy at Twilio, but yeah, I was, in most cases I was taking like a 20% or 30% pay cut.
Yeah, and I
Right.
think it's understandable, because like I understand that you were this like really highly paid worker at some point in your career, but then you got laid off, and then I mean, because there's such like mass layoffs happening around, the number of headcounts that the companies have are limited, right? So there's not as many jobs, but there are like 2x, 3x applicants. So as we talked about supply and demand, so now the supply is way too much, demand is not that high. So of course the salaries won't. Why would company pay you that much
Yeah,
money? Like, and
exactly.
if you ask for that much money because of your experience or your expertise, I mean, the company to cut off their like to show more profit, to cut off their losses and all of that, they have like 200 more applicants who would be willing to do the same job for much less money, like um so it's
Yeah.
understandable,
Definitely.
yeah, the
And
switch.
that is where I would say negotiation and your skills and doing extra things, all of those would come into the picture. And if someone has, now this is, we are going off topic here, but if someone has less expenses than their income, they can afford a 20% cut. But maybe someone else can't, and then that's more into how they manage their money, and then yeah, it becomes more complicated from there.
Definitely. And I think I love that I had to work at like a gas station when I was a student, and I had to deliver pizzas, because one thing it definitely taught me is how to be frugal. Um, and to this day, like I try to keep my expenses to bare minimum. Just because I can afford luxury doesn't mean I
Right.
need it. The reason is, I also don't get the point of doing luxury things. Like, okay, I'll treat myself, once 6 months with something tech related because I love tech, right? Like, I'll get a new iPad, or when the PS5 came, it took me a year and a half to finally be like, okay, I'm gonna buy a new PlayStation. So yes, every now and then you should reward yourself, but I think being frugal, I honestly like love stoicism. So like I follow stoic philosophy a lot. It's been a couple of years, and I think like one of the key principles is being frugal, because good days you don't worry
Right.
about them that much, but you always have to think about days which where it can get worse. And how you deal with that is what defines you as a person. So for me, I think even worst comes to worst, I had to go back and work at a gas station. I know I can do that because I've done that in
Yeah.
the past. So yeah, like live below means I also have the goal to retire
Yeah.
early. So if I live below that means I'm reaching that goal faster.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, money is in the end. I measure money as like how much freedom you have. So right.
Exactly.
So
That's a
yeah.
great way.
So I mean, if your money can't give freedom, then why? Like, what's the point, right? So that's what, yeah, I believe it. And I can have like,
Yeah,
Kritika and I both are very much into finance and learning about how personal
nice.
finance, but also like overall major macroeconomics. But we can have a separate
I
talk
was
just
gonna
for
say
that.
we can have a
If we
separate
meet in
episode for
person,
this.
and sometime we'll talk more about these things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Definitely.
loved how you touched this point and how important it is, and very less people talk about it. Um, and yeah, we follow in the same principles. So living an ascetic life,
Nice.
and like following stoicism, we're on the same page. Would love to talk more about it, but in a separate podcast session.
And in person
Um,
would be better.
and in
Definitely.
person, yeah. Yeah, so, well, I want to ask you the question I asked you in the beginning. So, about your experience in Google, right? So, how did you join? Well, how did you land a job in Google? And what did you do there? And how was your experience? And most importantly, why did you leave Google in like a quarter of a year or something? 3 months, 4 months, as you mentioned. Why? I want to understand all of that.
Sure. Yeah. So I think, as I said, I mentioned briefly that it happened during the peak COVID, hiring spree that all these companies were in. And for me, 2021, June, I believe, May or June, is when I first heard from the recruiter saying that, hey, we have this technical solutions engineering role that is open, and we think you'll be a great fit. And for someone that has dreamt of working at Google since like high school or so, also during COVID, I discovered this very niche day in a life videos of Google or like FANG
Yeah. Yeah.
engineers. Some of them would share their salaries, and I remember this story so like vividly because um, I have a couple of friends that would visit me during COVID. That's the only socialization we did, and I showed them, and I'm like, look at their lives. Like, the food is paid for, the offices are great, you're working for like a big tech company, and you're earning like that crazy amount of money. um and that was the dream. That was like 2019, 2020. I didn't know it would happen. um Not only it happened very quick, like a year after I got this recruiter reaching out. So once the recruiter reached out, I'm like, this is the moment. And I'm like, yeah, let's hop on a call. We did um like a pre-screen thing after that, and they had some like networking questions and cloud questions, and it all went good. It was a 45-minute call. After that, you do a loop. So the loop had 4 interviews, and one of them was coding challenge. The other one was a system design, and then there was a troubleshooting one, and last one was a googliness uh,
Googliness
interview,
interview.
which also,
What is that?
yeah. Have you heard about the bar raiser interview?
No.
No? Okay. So in certain companies it's called bar raiser, but in certain, like for Google, it's googliness. It's usually the hiring manager. So it's either the team you're gonna join, so the manager of that team, and just to see like how you would fit within the team dynamics. And also how you're well versed with company values. So like if you have them in you, and if you have portrayed them in your previous jobs. So that's why it's called
Got it. Okay.
googliness, like how googly you
Right, right.
are. So that was the last one. But so my technical interviews went, like the system design and troubleshooting went really good, because system design, it was about internet and like DNS questions, load balancing, and also like some database optimization. Of course, I was also preparing for all of this, so not a challenge. But the coding, I've never done data structure and algorithms. I bombed that one. Like, it was a 45-minute interview. We ended in 25 minutes. I knew like I
Yeah,
didn't do
and at
well
that
at
point, you
all.
must be thinking that I'm not getting this job.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Definitely.
but then I like had my system design and troubleshooting. I'm like, maybe. The googliness went really good. Like, I connected really well with the interviewer or the manager, and they didn't. So this took like 6 weeks until I got a reply. So they took a week and a half to just send me a reply, which was the most intense and like nerve wracking period. And then obviously I was rejected.
You
Um,
were okay. Oh,
the
wow.
Yeah, this was July 2021 at this point, and they were like, "Oh, sorry, but we didn't move forward with you." They don't provide you
Right.
feedback. Also, they were like, "There's a cool down period, so you can't apply to new jobs until 6 months pass by." I was devastated. It took me like 2 weeks to process this, because like I was working a full time job, and after that I would study for like 2 or 3 hours every day, just to get to a point so that I can appear for these interviews. And then I got an Amazon recruiter reaching out for a AWS role. Um, I bombed the first tech screen right out of the gate, because they asked me about a method in the code that they had, and I'm like, I don't know, I have zero clue what you're talking about. um Again, no excuses, this was all my bad. Like, I should be, if I'm going for that job, like I should have prepared well, I should have known data structures and algorithms and stuff like that, but I just didn't have enough time. So now I'm double devastated, because I'm rejected at two of the dream companies that I could ever offer a role at. But luckily, 4 months later, I received a message from the same recruiter from Google, and they're like, "Hey, we have a adjacent role. It's not technical solutions engineer; it's technical solutions specialist. So you don't need coding." I'm like, "Okay. Um, how many interviews do I have to do?" And they're like, "Just one."
Wow.
And that was the team matching googliness
Okay.
interview. I'm like, "Yeah, why not? Like, I will give it a shot." And this was Monday. They like she reached out, the recruiter. Wednesday I had my call, and the next Monday I had my offer. So it was like meant to
Yeah.
be, I guess. Like, it was very fast compared to like the 6 weeks it took them
It feels like
previously.
they already made up their mind
Um,
that they are very interested in you. They just
Yeah.
want to see, like, maybe with one interview if it's compatible or not.
yeah, and the good thing was that they carry your previous performance if you did like good. So like, because the coding challenge was not going to be part of it, they declined that score. But the system design and the troubleshooting, I guess I did really good, and they carried that
Right.
score or result, so that I just had to meet with the hiring manager, and that was it. And then the offer came in. I did my like negotiation stuff, and I was able to like negotiate few bits and pieces here and there. But it was it's Google. Like, it was a great jump from what I was making. And then the amount of perks you get working at these big tech companies is just crazy. Like, 100% coverage
Right.
over
Do you
health.
want to share numbers, or
Um,
if you want to keep them private, that's fine as well?
no, for sure, I can share numbers. So the total compensation. So for big tech, you have your stocks. Sometimes you have your sign-in bonus, and then you have your salary. So the total compensation for my first year came around to $135,000 Canadian. And to give you context, the previous role I was working was a DevOps engineer, and I was making $86,000 Canadian. So it was
Yeah,
a good jump.
absolutely. With
Definitely.
the perks and everything, like,
And
it's yeah, a dream job at that
yeah,
point.
definitely. And if I stayed there for a year and you perform like really good or even good, you get 15% of your salary as bonus. So that would add up to, like, I don't know, they gave me a number of like
Hmm.
$11,000 a year if the performance went
Right.
well. The reason I said 135 because I didn't stay there for a
Mhm.
year. I never got my performance
Right. Right.
bonus. For the fact I never got my first vest of stock
Oh
either.
no.
Like I left all of that.
Okay.
Yeah, they vest over a period of
Um,
2 years or something, right?
yeah, that was it, and no doubt it is a great company to work for. I had some amazing team members. My manager was great, but what I realized is as I joined Google and started working on things like onboarded and stuff, it was very support based role. So we had top 50 paying GCP customers that basically our team supported. So I felt like I'm back in 2018 doing support,
Right.
and there's nothing wrong with it. I don't think I was at the right place. So I'm like, okay, I talked to my parents again. Now I'm from India, so when I called back and told that I got into Google, it was a
Yeah.
huge deal. Let alone like I don't have a degree and stuff. Like, so my parents thought this is never going to happen, right? But it did happen, and for them, it's like I've always talked to my dad about any life stuff. It's weird how the dynamics change when you get
Hmm.
older. Like earlier, I would not share a
Yeah.
thing because you'll get scolded or
Yeah.
Yeah.
something. But yeah, I think it was really hard to like tell my parents and my partner that I'm not happy. Um, and so I waited till probation. I was like, maybe things change. This is just because it takes human mind to like it takes certain amount of time to get used to a change. So I started out going to the
Hmm.
office. Like I loved the office, the workspace we had, the food, as I said in the beginning, was amazing. But yeah, I just couldn't get used to the role itself. So I brought that up with my manager, and I tried moving to developer relations within Google. Of course, they had like a great GCP developer relations team. There was also a role open, but the thing is, you cannot move teams before 1 year.
Hmm.
And at that point, um, 8 months seemed like a lot. And I'm like, if I want to do developer relations, why not do it
Right.
now? So the advice I got was that I should quit and reapply to the GCP developer relations role. And that's what I did. I
Hmm.
quit, but then the Twilio role played out.
Okay.
So I joined Twilio, and they also had a really good offer. But yeah, that was the whole um, story behind it. Again, as I want to emphasize that there was nothing wrong with the company. There's nothing wrong with the role itself. The manager, people were amazing, very talented folks that I had to work with.
The
I
role
mean,
was not a
and
good fit, so that's
yeah,
right.
and in the end, if you're happy right now with what you're doing, that's all that matters. But is
Exactly.
there anything that you would change if you could go back in time?
Oh, change in the sense
Like
in
in your
any
tech
part of
career
my.
here in Canada, from starting as someone in support, tier one tickets, tier two, tier three, then getting into maybe cloud, then getting into Google. Before that, you were also as a DevOps engineer. Anything you would change?
That's very good question. I think the only thing I would change is I should have had market awareness way before looking for new roles. So I can give an estimate of and what people can expect. So like when I joined tech support, they offered me $36,000 a
Hmm.
year. When I made it to cloud engineer, they offered me $50,000 Canadian a year. After doing cloud engineering for 2 years, I realized how much cloud engineers were
Right.
earning. And after 2 years, I was also in a good shape of asking for a raise because now I not only have experience but also like I had a good highly paid certifications also within
Right.
AWS. And I was multi cloud at that time. Like I knew Azure as well to a really good extent. But I didn't research. Like I was happy.
Yeah.
I think that's what it came down to. Like, yeah, I can live with what I was making. But if I did the research,
Yeah.
early on, I think I would have been better financially. Not that I feel like I have any regrets, but yeah, And also, I think one thing that I won't change is peace over
Right.
paycheck. I think it took a good amount of courage and like strength to quit Google in 4 months, given that it was a dream for me. But at the end, it was like, no, I was just dreading
Yeah,
every day.
and that's not worth it.
That's not
Exactly.
worth it. Yeah, yeah. And it also was impacting. It's the thing you need to consider once you have like a partner or family is it's not just impacting you. Your energy when you come back home, it impacts
Yeah.
others, and I don't want to make them go through that.
Yeah,
It's not fair to them.
Yeah,
that's a
absolutely.
good point. Yeah.
And okay, and so throughout all these years, I see that you also got a lot of certifications. I went to your LinkedIn and had a sneak peek into what you were doing. You have maybe around 20 certifications, right? Which is commendable. Like, it's not easy to get, and it's not just foundational. You also went through basic ones, then more advanced ones, and which take time and energy, and sometimes money as well if your company is not paying for it. If if you would recommend only one certificate or a certification path to an engineer right now, or someone who's getting into tech, which one would it be?
Great question. Great question. I think one certificate.
Or a certification
um
path, maybe you will say that these three, one after the other, are the best in terms of getting a job or getting trained.
yeah, so I think specifically I'm going to be biased towards AWS. You can read about the market share of all these cloud providers. But if you don't know and you don't have a preference yet on which cloud to pick, and you have like zero skills in AWS, Azure, GCP, I would pick, and you can't pick for yourself, I would pick AWS just because of the market share. If you have, and I think you should definitely do research. Please go to your local area and look at job listings for cloud engineer and DevOps engineer and see what clouds are listed there. So if you see Azure is prominent in your area, go do Azure. Like, you have to be
Yeah,
practical
great
about this
advice.
if you want to get job. And I feel like less and less people do research now. I don't know why that has changed. Like, it is your career, so you should make sound decisions based on data. So once you have that figured out, I would say prepare for foundational. You don't have to give the certification, because I think certifications provide you a great learning path. So why do we go to colleges? Because all of the resources are still available for free, on YouTube or other
Right.
courses that are available online. But the thing with going to a college is you get structured learning with someone who has done so many years of teaching, right? So same thing is with the certifications. Like, you can learn AWS on your own, building your own roadmap. But if you want a structured learning path, AWS Cloud Practitioner is the first certification to start in. Azure has AZ 900, or Azure Fundamentals, I think it's called. Um, Prepare for that. Don't sit the exam. Go through the path itself. Take AZ 900 or AWS Cloud Practitioner course. Then go for the Solutions Architect for AWS, which is an associate level. For Azure, I would say go for AZ 104 or AZ 204. So the 204 is more developer focused. AZ 104 is more sysadmin
Okay.
focused. Sit that one. So you should sit the associate one. And I think it costs around $160 USD. And there are usually promotions going on, so look for challenges and skills. Like, Microsoft has cloud skills challenges. So any of the certification that I have given in the last 2 years, even three, like, there are some pro level certifications that are $300. All of them were either part of some challenge, so I got a voucher, or some community program that I'm part of. So try to see ways if you can get it funded through these challenges or community programs. And I would say the associate level is fine. And now you should start applying those skills to like actual use. So, like, start building projects within AWS or
Yeah.
Azure. At an associate level, you should be like familiar with how to host like a or like 3-tier application, or how you can build serverless full stack applications. And I think that should be your goal
Right.
rather than just passing the
Yeah.
exam. Like hands-on skills, hands down. Like when you get into an interview, if you just have the certification and no hands-on skills, they can tell like within like 10
Yeah, it's
minutes.
easy
On
for
the
us
other
to catch
hand,
bullshit. Like even if we are interviewing someone new and they have certification, but they are not able to actually tell us the implementation. Like it takes 2 minutes to figure that out.
definitely. And I think the other way around is way more like beneficial. Like if you don't have the certification, but you like studied for these two to get your skills up to the point, and you have some projects with hands-on skills, but you don't sit the exam itself, you're still gonna like you're gonna do
Yeah.
better than someone who just has the certification. So yeah, focus on the skills rather than the badge, I would say. I want to preface that. And yeah, I think that should be enough. Don't go for the pro or the expert level. Once you get the job, you should definitely pursue that if you want
Right.
to. But I think the associate level is a good foundation for your job search.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah, that actually answers the question I want to ask. How can one start in cloud today? But I guess you covered the certification part, but do you want to add something else?
Yeah, this is where my shameless plug comes in. So I'm pointing to the Learn to Cloud sign. It's a free open source guide that my friend Gwen, who works at Microsoft, built. I'm also a core contributor to that project, so go check it out. It's built from first hand experience. Both of us are we don't have computer science degrees. We came from help desk kind of experience and pivoted to cloud. So we have been on that self-taught route, and it comes from first-hand experience. We have tried to cover everything that you should be familiar with before um, jumping into a cloud role. So yeah, go check it out. It's learntocloud.guide. And it's now we have a website. Earlier it was just a GitHub
Mhm.
repo. But yeah, if you have any questions, I'm always available. The realms of social
Yeah,
media.
we'll add
We'll
all the
add it in
links
the
and all the
description.
socials, yeah, in the description below. Also, maybe most likely the pinned comment in this YouTube video as well. Like we'll add all your links so that you can reach out to Rishabh or go to Learn to Cloud and learn more about cloud.
So
That's
I guess it's time for the rapid fire round, but if you have something to say before that,
no, no,
might
no.
as
That is
well.
exactly what I was going to say. It's my favorite round. I can't wait to get
Yeah.
into it. It's the most fun part of the podcast for me.
Yeah. So I guess the name gives it away. It's a rapid fire round, so you can respond back with the first thought that pops into your mind. We're gonna ask you some questions and we'll alternate it. So I'll start. The first question is, what's the most overrated tech buzzword right now?
AI.
Yeah, yeah. I was expecting that one. And what emerging tech are you most excited about?
AI itself.
Well, that's contradicting.
Specifically, yeah, specifically, I think the agentic use of AI. So, like, we are seeing a lot of co-pilots that are built specific to the use case. So, like, GitHub Copilot for your coding assistant needs, and so I'm looking forward to what all different agentic use cases we can come up with, and how these players in the AI market will play out. I know that was not rapid,
No,
but
no, that's good.
No, yeah, it's all good. So the next question is also related to AI. Do you think will AI replace developers? If no, will AI replace some developers?
AI will replace some developers. Yes.
Awesome. Okay, what cloud would you say is best? AWS, GCP, or Azure?
Oh God. It's just DigitalOcean. No, I'm just kidding. Um, I'm gonna go with AWS. I can rank it, I guess, because I use
Yes.
all three. So AWS, Azure, GCP.
Wow, GCP is on the bottom for you. Okay, for me, I really like GCP more, but again, a discussion for another day.
Best book for developers.
The Phoenix Project,
I am reading it right
and
now.
that is coming from a bias towards DevOps and cloud. If you haven't read it, you should definitely read it.
What do you
Yeah.
think about lead code? Should people do it or no?
If you're going for software engineering roles, I based on my knowledge, I think it is necessary to some extent, because I'm a huge believer in like hands-on practice, and I think it's a great way to build that skill. Coming from like cloud and DevOps background, no, I I don't do lead
Sure.
code. Um,
So the next is best productivity tool for programmers.
it's a basic notebook with a pen. You write down your to do, and you're good. Nothing fancy. But yeah, I think it's
What is
best.
better, ChatGPT or Gemini?
I've been using Claude a lot lately by Anthropic. I used to be a pro subscriber of ChatGPT. I loved it, but the last month I've spent with Claude is it's been really good.
I've,
I think
I've never used
they're
that.
doing something
Yeah,
right.
I'll try it out. I've
It's
never used
getting
that.
very popular recently. I've heard about it a lot, AI, but yeah, I've never used
Yeah,
it.
yeah. We were also lacking access. They took some time to release it in Canada, so
Right. Well, next is what company do you think will win the AI race? Microsoft, Google, Apple?
really intrigued by what Apple is doing. I think that is somewhere all companies will be headed, to do AI machine learning stuff on their own compute. I think it is also very interesting for any of the future cloud engineers and infrastructure engineers. Like, you need to figure out infrastructure intelligence for AI stuff, like how that can be optimized to run AI workloads. For that purposes, I would say Apple, but I think Microsoft might win the race with their partnership with OpenAI.
Okay, final question of the day. If you could get any tech job today, which one would you choose? The location, the company, and the title.
Oh my god. Um, Probably developer relations engineer in US at product or cloud based company.
Awesome. That's good. And that ends like that summarizes the podcast. Is there anything else you want to discuss before we leave? I think we had a great discussion. Like 2 hours just flew by. I didn't
Love the
even. Yeah.
conversation. It's
Yeah,
almost two
yeah.
hours, yeah.
I was checking the time. No, it was great. It was great conversation. Thank you both for having me. It was a pleasure. And yeah, I've been watching the podcast. I've been watching the content on Instagram. Keep up the keep up the entertaining reels. Some of them make me laugh so much. So I love that. But yeah, no, it was great talking to you today. And
Yeah. Likewise.
I think
Yeah,
that's about it.
likewise, and yeah, looking forward to see you sometime in person. Maybe when we are near Toronto. If you come to Montreal, let us know. But yeah, thank you again for being on the podcast, and see you maybe next time.
Thanks.
For sure. Thank you.